In this video, I'm going to show you how to remove and replace a bathroom vanity. I'm How To Bob, and you can see the vanity here is an old laminate top with a set-in bowl. So I'm going to start out by turning on the faucet, cold side, then I can go underneath, check my shutoffs, make sure that they are good. I'll turn that off and then check again, and that seems to be good. So I'll start with the hot next, turn that one off. And then I'll check back up top, and that one's also good. So that means I don't have to replace my shutoffs. If they were no good, I would replace those. So I'm going to remove my supply lines now. I've got a bucket underneath to catch any water, because there will be water coming out. Then I can remove my hot side supply line, and I'll drain the water out of the hot side. Then I can move on to the drain section. I'm just going to start unscrewing all the drain pieces. That'll make it easier to remove all the pieces of my trap. So once I get it loose, I can start pulling the parts off and empty the water that's in the trap into my bucket. Next, I'm going to unscrew the top. There's little cleats on each corner, and the screws go through the cleats into the countertop, so those will get removed. And then I'll go back to the top section and cut the caulking around the countertop that's holding it to the wall. And I'll do that all the way around the vanity top. Cut through it a couple times, make sure I get a nice cut, and that should loosen the vanity top, make it easier for me to remove. Just shake it back and forth, and got to cut the backsplash caulking a little bit more, and then along this side. One more cut, and you can see it's real loose now, so I can just pull the countertop off of the vanity, set that out of the way. And then I can remove the screws that are holding the cabinet to the wall. And there's a couple on the side over here. There's even some at the bottom of the side. So now, to make it easier to remove my cabinet, I'm going to remove the shutoffs. But before I do that, I need to go to the basement and shut off the water supply to the house. And then I'll open up my shutoff valves, and you can hear the water is going back down. I've opened a faucet downstairs so that the water will flow down to the faucet in a lower part of the house. I always like to open the lowest faucet in the house when I drain the lines, and I'll do the same thing for the cold side. Just remove the shutoffs, and then I'm going to pull my escutcheon plates out and cut those out of the way. I'm going to replace those with new ones, so everything's fresh and new once I get done with the project. So these are metal ones that tend to rust, and the chrome on them pit, so I will cut those off with a pair of tin snips. And then I can remove the rest of my drain piece here, and I'll stuff a piece of towel in there to keep any sewer gases from coming out. So I'm going to cut the paint. This vanity was painted a little bit to the wall here. This will make it easier for the cabinet to be removed if I cut along the edge, and then I need to remove the baseboard trim before I can get my vanity loose. So I'll pull the trim away from the toe kick area, and then I can pull my vanity out, and I got to be careful of the pipes. Just pull it straight out, and I can get that out of the way. So I can start building my countertop up. I'm going to be putting a Price Pfister faucet in. It's an 8-inch spread, so I'll put my 2 valves in first. Start off over here with the cold, and it gets oriented this way. I'll put a flat square washer on, and then the valve body nut get screwed on afterwards. It just has to be fed around the supply tubes here. And once I get that fed around, I can tighten that up to the valve. And it came with this handy little hollow wrench that I can put over the tubes and get a good tighten on it, which is very nice. Price Fister. This is the hot side. You can see it's got a red mark on it. And I'll get that oriented the right way. Put my flat washer on. And then I can put my nut, feed it over top of the supply tubes here. And I can put the nut on and spin that down. Get it as tight as I can, and then I'll use the wrench that they gave me, slide it over top of my supply tubes and tighten that down. So I've got those locked in. I can start on the spout next, and I got to put the cover or plate underneath, get it oriented in the correct direction so that it matches the faucet. Slide that through the hole and put the C-shaped washer on, and then put the nut and tighten that down by hand. And once I get that fairly tight, I want to make sure that my spout is aimed right at the drain as close as I can. And again, I can use the tool that came with the faucet to tighten down this nut, and I'll hold the spout as close as I can to the center. I want to make sure that's centered when it gets tighter. And you can see that the spout is right in line with the drain. So now I can take the Y fitting, and this is what mixes the water from the hot that I plug in here and the cold that gets plugged in here. And my supply lines are going to get hooked up right here. However, I need an adapter. Luckily, it came with the faucet. So I put my adapter on my supply tube. And then I tighten that down about a quarter turn. And then I can do the cold side as well. Give it a quarter turn. And then I can install my drain. So it came put together, so I have to take it apart. Now there's a little rubber gasket that goes in top. It did not recommend using any plumber's putty or silicone. Next, I'm going to put the rubber washer with the beveled end up, and I want to slide that all the way up as close as I can to the bottom of the countertop. Then I can add the friction washer, and last but not least, the nut, and I'll tighten that down. There's no pop-up on this, so I don't have to worry about the orientation of my drain. Once I get that tight, I can start working on the handles for the faucet. You can see I've got the left one on, and I just wanted to see where the orientation was going to be. So I put the ring on, and then there's a little plastic part that screws over top to hold the ring into place. So I got to center the metal ring and tighten down my plastic part. Now you can see the faucet can go on this way, the handle can go on this way. That's not right. It can go on this way, that's not right, or it can go on this way, which is the way I want it to go. And then this one has already been oriented the correct way. So I'll turn those on and then tighten down the handles with the wrench, hex wrench that came with the faucet set. So those are tightened down and they're oriented the correct way. I'll go back to the back side and put my supply lines on. I like to do a lot of this work, or all the work that I can, before I put the vanity top on. It's just a whole lot easier to do it here in the open than it would be to do it underneath the vanity with it already installed, so I give that a quarter turn once I get it hand tight. Okay, before I install the vanity cabinet, I want to clean up the old caulking that was around the backsplash and along the side, just to give me a nice clean fit. And I'm going to remove the nuts so I don't have to drill as big a hole. And to do that, I'll use a pair of channel locks, slip joint pliers, and just use them like a slide hammer and hammer the compression ring off so that I don't have to drill as big a hole in the vanity. And that would be a good time to paint the walls if you're going to repaint. So I've got the vanity cabinet close up against the pipes, and you can see I'm going to just mark those so I get a guide as to where I want to drill my hole. I'll mark the 3 pipes, the hot, the cold, and the drain. And again, that's just going to give me an idea where I'm going to drill my holes in the back of the vanity. This vanity has a full back. Some of them have a big opening, but this one has a full back, so I want to make sure that I put the holes for the pipes in the correct location. Once I get those marked, I'll take my tape measure and run that down to the pipes and mark the center of the pipe and take the measurement and write it down on the top of the vanity. And then I'll repeat the process for the 2 other pipes, marking the center line of the pipe and writing down the measurement for the height. And I'll have to add half the distance of the pipe so that I get my height correct. So I'll take that measurement now, add half of that to what I wrote down on top of the vanity, and that's where I'm going to make my mark. So I'll just extend that line down the distance that I measured in the previous part, and that's where that one's going to end up, plus half the distance of the pipe. Same with this one, plus half the distance of the pipe, and again on this one, plus half the distance of the pipe. That'll get me the center of the pipe, and then I will get my vertical line. I'll just extend that down using any straight edge, level, T-square, speed square, whatever you have. And that'll give me my marks right there. And let me extend this one down just a little bit further. And there we go. And last but not least, I've got this side. So now that I've got my holes marked, I can drill. I'll start on the back side and get a hole going through the front, and then stop and then go to the next hole. And then I'll get my drain. Same thing, just get started on the back, and then I'll move around to the front, and that'll give me a nice clean hole in the front of the vanity where you're going to see it without blowing out the hole in the back. So now that I've got my holes drilled, I'll slide the vanity in, check for fit. And it looks like my holes lined up pretty good. So I can slide the vanity all the way back, check my level from side to side, and then I want to check my level from front to back, and it looks like I need to push it back just a little bit, so I'll push it back a little bit. I've got the screws set in the vanity even with the studs in the wall, and as I push it back, I'm going to screw it in and use a shim behind the cabinet. And I'll do the same thing for the other side. And then I can cut my shims off and snap them right at the surface. And that lifted the front of the vanity off the floor, so I will shim underneath the front part of the vanity just to give it some support before I go to the side. And I know there's a stud right here. Put a screw in the side of the cabinet and put my shim in, and then I can screw the side of the vanity to the wall, and that'll make it nice and solid. I'll add some new escutcheon plates before I put the nut and my new compression rings on. Then I'm going to reuse the shutoffs. They were fairly new and in good shape. A lot of times I will replace those. So these are in good shape, so I will reuse these. Get that hand tight quarter turn past that, and that will be good. Once I get those tightened down all the way, I'll turn those off to the off position before I turn the water back on. So I'll turn the water back on to the house. Then I'm going to prep the cabinet for the vanity top. I'll run around the edge of the cabinet with some silicone. I'll go all the way around the edges. Make sure that all the edges are covered, and then I can take my vanity top and set it on top of the cabinet. Make sure it goes all the way into the corner and press it down into the silicone and go underneath and hook up my supply lines and tighten those down using the wrench. And then I can get the hot side as well while I'm down here. I like to do the supply lines first. It's easier than doing them after you do the drain. So I've got my rag that I put in there. I want to put my washer, the beveled end, in towards the pipe, and I'm going to dry fit this up and see how this is going to fit, because this vanity is not as wide and not as deep as the other one, so I'm going to have to do some modifications on this. Put my tailpiece on, tailpiece extension, and it's not going to fit, so I'm going to have to do some creative. It's going to have to fit like this, and I'll have to use a bend to make this fit. Let me put this together, and I'll put it together loose and we'll see how it fits. So I'll put my nut on first, my washer with the beveled end down, slide that up, put my tailpiece extension on, and then I can put my drain together, and this is how it's going to look once it's done. So I got it all together, tighten it up, and I can turn on my water shutoffs. And before I turn the faucet on, I want to remove the aerator, because taking out the supply lines usually gets some calcium deposits and debris in your aerator. So I just remove that and carefully turn on the water, because it's going to cough and sputter, and I'll usually block it with my hand because it's going to spray and spit and get water everywhere. So I usually put my hand over it for a minute. Once that runs for a little bit, I can reinstall the aerator and then turn the water on, and all is good here, hot and cold. So now we're going to check the drain for any leaks. Go around the whole area, and that's just with the water running. So once I get done checking it that way, I like to close the drain and fill up the sink till it's all the way full, and then let the drain go with the water running, and that'll give the drain the most pressure it should ever see. And I don't see any leaks, so it's all good down here. No leaks for the supply, no leaks for the drain, and it's flowing pretty good, so I can shut that off and caulk around the edges. Now this vanity top mates right up against a paintable surface, so I'm going to be using a paintable caulking, because if I used a silicone, there would be no way to paint that. You can use a paintable silicone, but I want to make sure that the caulking I use here is paintable. Once I get a bead of caulking in, I'll use my finger to go around and round out the bead of caulking and make sure it's nice and smooth. So that's how you replace a vanity. If you like this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and as always, thanks for watching.